What's up, YouTube? This is Kyle with Serious Speeds here. One of the things I want to talk about today is mazdaspeed intake manifolds. Now, there's already a lot of information out there on the market in regards to some of the pluses and minuses of certain manifolds there. But the ones that I want to highlight there are the JMS manifold there, and then also the Damon Motorsports Ford Focus ST manifold there. And I wanted to talk about why I went with the Ford Focus ST manifold on my particular build there. So just to get into it here, we have the JMF manifold, and one of the reasons why I looked into the Ford Focus ST manifold there is, one, cost was definitely a factor, but then two, if I should ever have to replace it, how much would that cost as well? And then the flow distribution between the runners. What is the flow imbalance? What is the variation between the runners? So the JMF manifold actually states that there's anywhere between about 7 and 10% of a flow imbalance between each of these individual runners. And the reason for that, as you can actually see, it has a bend or an elbow there where the air actually has to bend in order to get into the manifold. This is where the throttle body actually mounts. So when that throttle body flap opens, all the air goes inside, and then it actually has to bend, and then it goes to the equal length runners. Unlike the inefficient design there that Mazda initially incorporated there with different length runners there and on the stock manifold. And one of the reasons why a lot of people ditch that manifold is because it's notorious for going lean on the cylinder number 3, or that runner for cylinder number 3. So you may have two banks that may not be too bad there, but then number 3 seems to actually lean out. So initially, when I was in the market to actually buy a intake manifold, I was initially looking at this one because it's one of the most popular amongst the mazdaspeeds there. What I actually found when I actually talked with Edge Autosport about the JMS manifold or JMF manifold, and this is when I was actually stock block, they said if you don't have a big turbo on it, I was running a BNR Stage 3 at the time, and it was a stock block, they said you're not going to really benefit too much from running that manifold. So I asked them, why is that? And what they replied is that, one, you're going to lose a lot of that low to mid-range torque there from utilizing that manifold. That manifold specializes in being more of a top end. So you'll get a lot of upper mid-range, you'll get a lot of high RPM peak power from that actual manifold because it flows a significant amount of CFM the more you actually rev the vehicle up, or the higher up in the RPM band you are. So then I started digging around, and that's when I actually talked with Damon Motorsports. And Damon Motorsports was very helpful in regards to some of the shortcomings and then also some of the pluses of their manifold there. So as you can see, their manifold is plastic. It's not as pretty. It just has that nice Damon Motorsports adapter plate. But what you can see is that the throttle body bolts on directly to that intake manifold there. So there's no bends, there's no elbows there. It's just a straight shot, and that's the reason why they can boast about their 2% variation between the actual runners or flow imbalance, because the throttle body is centered and there's no bends or anything that the air actually has to go around or come up in order to get into the runners there. So that was one of the biggest things there that also influenced me with the JMF, and also with the Focus ST manifolds. You can add port injection to either one of those there. At this point in time, I was actually running methanol, so I had the methanol MPT fittings actually installed on my particular rail. Now, some people wondered why I didn't actually just port the stock one. Well, the stock one has a flow imbalance of anywhere from 18 to 21%. When you port it, you can get it down to between 13 to 15% of a flow imbalance, but it does very, very little because the stock one actually has like I want to say like a basket that the runners are actually attached to. So the air actually bends. It has an elbow somewhat like the JMF manifold, except that elbow actually goes up into what looks like a basket there. And then from in that basket, it gets distributed into each of the runners there. So it's a very inefficient design. I Fortunately, never ran into that issue with any of my stock block motors there. I had other issues as far as that's concerned, as far as it running lean. But what I wanted to actually show you guys is I want to show you my intake manifold on my car. I want to take a quick trip out to the garage. Let's see there. My dimly lit garage here. And I'll show you my setup here. So, as you can see here, I have the methanol. It's a double zone methanol system and controller there. I had that running to this Aeromotive fuel pressure, boost reference fuel pressure regulator with a fuel pressure gauge. Now, this is the main solenoid for the actual mesh system there. So that big one there, I'm sorry I had the light in front of it there. And then that goes around underneath this intercooler piping. And then we have direct port right into the actual intake manifold there. So that's direct right into the actual engine, right into the engine chamber. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're all individual. However, I had to disconnect mine because my computer, or the stock computer, could not keep up with maintaining the port injection and the actual and the methanol as well. It can only control one of them, you know what I mean? Because you're running so many things piggybacking off of that ECU. So I had methanol, and then I had the secondary, the split second controller there, which I have hidden back here, kind of out of the way. If you can actually see that there. I need some better lighting in here. I do apologize. But it could not do both there, at least not reliably. I would get actual leaning out on cylinder number 4. I also had an issue where I took my car to an incompetent tuner and ended up blowing up my first built motor on this car there with that controller, with that split second controller, because they had it actually referencing boost, and that is a voltage based system there. So it was running on pure meth, and on a Mustang dyno it made 468 and 470 at the wheel before it actually blew up on the 12th run there. This particular intake manifold, the reason why I like it is not only is it's sturdy, I know it's plastic there, but it's a very sleek fit. And I don't know if you can actually see here that it just fits right inside the middle, right behind the actual radiator shroud there as well. And these runners on it, when you look in the pictures, don't really do it justice, but these are some very large runners there, and they're all equally distributed. Only, like I said, about a 2% flow imbalance there. So the other thing I wanted to actually talk about, and we can go back into the house here. Only other thing I wanted to actually talk about on this is that when you buy your manifolds, when I built this car, I knew that I was going to not build it to the gills there, because I wasn't shooting for record-breaking horsepower. I was actually just shooting for something that was going to be fast on the street and was gonna have good daily drivability there. I wasn't shooting for breaking records. I wasn't shooting for 800 wheel horsepower. I wasn't shooting for 1,000 wheel horsepower there. I was shooting to make 450 to 500 wheel horsepower. Now, YouTube has a lot of people jaded, because people tend to believe on here that, hey, if you're not making 500, 700, 800, 1,200, 2,000 horsepower, that your car's not fast. Let me tell you, if you have either a Subaru, Mazdaspeed, or any four-banger that's all-wheel drive, and you're making 450 wheel plus on the street, it is a very fast car. And you run out of real estate before you can even utilize all that speed, you can get yourself in some serious trouble there. These cars are not toys at that type of wheel horsepower, especially when you're making more torque than you're actually making wheel horsepower. And that's what us Mazdaspeed guys have on our side. When we race Hondas are very high RPM cars there. And they use that RPM to actually combat the fact that they have a lack of torque there. So RPM will take care of that. Their lack of torque, because they can rev up to about 8,000, 9,000 RPM, they don't really need torque. So what we have on our sides is that we do have torque, and I'm not hating on Hondas or anything like that because I love Hondas too, but we have torque on our side there. So what you want to do is try to get as much torque as you can out of your vehicle there, especially if you can actually put it down. Now, if you have a mazdaspeed 3, you may be saying, man, I'm going to go with the JMF because, hey, you know, I got enough torque. I'm fighting torque steer and so on and so forth there. But torque can be used in any given race there. Torque is what allows your car to get into your horsepower, or get through your power band quicker there. Like torque will get you there. Horsepower will keep you there. So if you can make a lot of torque with your vehicle there and make the subsequent horsepower there, the vehicle will pull harder, and it will feel like it's pulling harder because you're making a lot of torque. Case in point, something completely different, but if you like American muscle, if you drive a Z06, if you ever drive a Z06, you'll see that they start redlining at 6,500 RPM. They're not high winders there, but you'd be hard pressed to find a stock Honda Civic or anything remotely close to that power range there that would be able to keep up with that car. And that's because it makes a lot of torque. It's able to get to its horsepower a lot faster there. Torque is actually what wins races there. Horsepower sells cars. That's what Carroll Shelby says, and it's true in every sense of the word. But the reason why I say this, getting back to the intake manifolds there, is that when you look for an intake manifold, you want to find something that's going to actually suit your power goals. Now, if you're trying to build a 600 wheel horsepower car, then a JMF intake manifold is going to be perfect for you if you're looking for something that's going to be high RPM. Considering our cars, even with a big turbo, will rev to about 7,000 RPM before you have to actually start doing head pouring, before you do cams there. Then you can start revving it up higher and expanding that higher RPM power. But just keep this in mind there, is that the higher you rev the car, the more you're going to accelerate the wear of the engine internals, even if they're built there, because you're revving those things up constantly and constantly and constantly. So that will happen. The lower you can keep the RPM, the safer it is, because the motor does not have to rev up as high, and you have less of a chance of actually beating up the parts as much. Not to say that there aren't high RPM cars out there with solid rollers and so on and so forth, or Hondas out there that have been in the game for a long time there and they haven't had to take their motor out. There are those anomalies. There are those people that are actually doing it. But if this is a daily driven car, or if this is a car that you enjoy a lot during the summer months there, you're going to want to think about that before actually making that purchase. Now, that Focus ST manifold, you can make 1,000 horsepower with it. Will it flow like the JMF? No, it will not. Will you have that even flow distribution more so than the JMF? Yes, you will. Will it be as pretty as the JMF? No, it will not. But if you're not into aesthetics and you're more into it being functional and being cost effective, then that's the way to actually go with the intake manifolds. And plus, like I said, I built a car that was going to be anywhere between 400 and 500 wheel horsepower. That manifold actually suited my build. I have another car that I'm shooting for the stars as far as horsepower. I wasn't trying to do it with this one. I just wanted this one to be a fast street car and that could beat V8s and take out the other four-cylinder cars that are out there, a couple of other four-cylinder cars that are out there, which it can do. So I accomplished that goal with that particular build. So when you plot out your build, just make sure that you're building your car for you and not for anybody else. And also make sure that you're not overkilling it with the parts that you're putting on there and overspending on things that you actually don't need. And that's the purpose of this video there, because you can make the power. What I will do just to basically kind of show how much power this car is actually making. Again, the car was tuned by Nissan. If anyone has been to Nissan and his dyno in New Jersey, you will understand that Nissan only has a two-wheel drive dyno. They do a lot of speed 3s, even though when I got there, it looked like a speed 6 Morgatory. There was tons of speed 6s sitting out front there. But in order to dyno them, he disables the actual all-wheel drive there, and he dynos them in front-wheel drive. Then you actually have to calculate that. So that was one of the reasons why I didn't bring back any dyno sheets. I live in Rochester, New York. I had the car previously tuned by Berg Racing prior to actually taking it to Nissan there, but due to the fact that they specialize that, and a lot of issues with blown motors, which I will talk about in another video, taking it to people that do not specialize in Mazda speeds there. That's one of the reasons why I took it to Nissan, and I prefer dyno tunes over email tunes. Not to say that you can't have success with email tunes, but I prefer to actually get the car on the dyno, get it dialed in on the dyno. Plus, I'm very impatient. I can't wait for 4 or 5 revisions there. I need to get it on there. I need to get it done, and I need to get back to enjoying my car. So that's the reason why I did it that way. Free tune, purple drink, even Nissan, they all do email tunes, so there's nothing wrong with that. I got a buddy with a Speed 3 that hopefully will be linking up in a video as well, that has one of Free Tunes email tunes as well. So as long as you're going to one of those guys who specializes in it, that is the smartest thing to do. I was not smart when I went through that process, and I paid dearly for it. But that's it on the intake manifolds there. Please leave your comments below, and please subscribe.